Hello there, hoppers, and welcome to part 2 of this discussion trilogy, where we are analysing and speculating about the new Pokémon Sword and Shield starting trio. Now, back in part 1, despite a very concerning and clearly misguided eBay ad, we eventually discussed the grass-type Pokémon Grookey, talking about what was bad and what was, well, bad, but anyway. If you missed that video and you want to watch it before this one, then don't panic, there'll be a link to it in the video's description down at the bottom, so feel free to check it out. And for those of you who are sticking around, remember if a segment doesn't interest you, then you too can also look in the video's description, where you will see a list of navigation links covering all of the main points. Anyway, with all that out of the way, let's get straight back into the swing of things. Continuing now with the second pocket monster in this new trio, the Fire-type Pokémon Scorbunny. So again, the current dex states, a rabbit Pokemon that is always running about, bursting with energy. And all I can say to that is that it is certainly a Pokemon that seems to be bursting with potential. Finally, we have been presented something different, something new. We have never had a rabbit starter before, and I think it looks awesome. In part, its design actually looks very reminiscent of the popular Warner Brothers animation style, and there is no shortage of examples, as there are plenty of bunny characters to choose from, all of which sport those same trademark paws. You know, with the thin legs that stretch down to those oversized, two-tone, humongous feet.
Okay, so I have big feet. Sue me.
Anyway, I think it's a fair assumption to say that the Warner Brothers style could have easily served as inspiration for Scorbunny's design, even if only for the feet, because the resemblance is definitely there. And speaking of inspiration, when looking at Scorbunny's current colour palette, I can't help but think of one of those little candy corn sweets. You know, the ones you see in those American Halloween films or TV shows, for example. Because, as you can see, its design sports the same orange, yellow, and even white colouring. But yes, regardless, so far I think this design looks pretty cool. And as for the colour choice, well, you could say it's pretty sweet. However, is it original? Is it a fresh design, or just like Grookey, has it borrowed past the point of originality? Well, in terms of resemblances to other Pokemon, I don't really see any. Nothing has sprung to mind, quite like it did with Grookey. I mean, sure, it's got the same cute expression as Chespin, for example, but that's a feature that almost all the other cute Pokemon share, because it's just an expression, it is not the core design. Otherwise, under those terms, you would have to conclude that the last trainer in Pokemon X and Y has also borrowed from Chespin, as she too has the same expression. You see, it's just not a valid argument, because it's not the design, it is just an expression for the chosen pose. If they had given Scorbunny a frown, for example, then we wouldn't be discussing it. So, call it what you want. An expression, a pose, a display of emotion, if you will. But the bottom line is, it is not part of its core design. So therefore, it is a similarity that I am more than willing to overlook. One similarity that most won't overlook, however, is that Scorbunny's pose looks identical to that of Chimchar's. But again, this is just a pose, and not a copied design. Hell, Chimchar's pose in itself copied straight from Combuskin's. And do they look the same? Of course not. Although, you know, it does actually make me wonder, you know, whether or not this pose holds a hidden message. Maybe it's a hint that Scorbunny will evolve into a fire-fighting type Pokemon. Because you see, the other two fire Pokemon who also sported this very pose were or became fire-fighting types. There was Chimchar, the 4th generation fire starter, who becomes part fighting type after it evolves into Monferno. And of course there is Combuskin, who is part fighting type, and might I add is actually evolved from Torchic, the 3rd generation fire starter. So when you actually think about it, it would actually make sense for them to go down this road, because they have done it before. Come to think of it, it does actually look like it's got a plaster or bandage patch on its nose and feet, which is something we have actually seen before in both the Pokemon games and the Pokemon anime, with Maylene, the Veil Stone Gym Leader from Generation 4, who, might I add, specialises in none other than fighting type Pokemon. So, it would appear to be a very real possibility. However, I'm really hoping this isn't the case, because just like I criticised Monkey Pokemon for being overused, well, when it comes to starter Pokemon, so are fire fighting types. I mean, we've had 3 out of the last 7 incarnations. And if Scorbunny does in fact evolve into a fire fighting type, then that would make it 4 out of 8. Meaning half of all the current fire starters would all have the same subtyping. And my amazing math skills to one side, the fact is that this is just bone idle laziness, and it's just unnecessary. There are plenty of different typings they could have chose from. And it's not like they haven't spiced things up before, because the Gen 6 fire starter, Fennekin, became a fire psychic type after it evolved into Delphox, and thus finally breaking the streak of 3 fire fighting types in a frickin' row. And that itself was then followed up by Gen 7's Litten, where its final evolution became a fire dark type. But now it would seem that after 2 large steps in the right direction, it seems that with Scorbunny they are going to be taking a couple of giant steps back into what has become a cliche for these fire starters. Because from what we are seeing here, the evidence is certainly suggesting as much. And that truly baffles me, especially when you realise that out of a possible 17 types, they have only used 4. Just 4. 1 flying, 1 psychic, 1 dark, and 3 fighting. And yes, I know there is technically a 5th subtyping, but the Charizard X Mega form doesn't really count. Because you see, it's just a temporary form. And let's face it, it only really exists as an apology for not christening its original form with the dragon typing. But anyway, back to what I was saying. If it wasn't already bad enough that there were 3 fire fighting types, it's actually 6 when you include the middle evolutions. And that's another thing, when you realise that by comparison all the others have to become fully evolved before they unlock their subtyping, it certainly seems that the firefighting groups are getting extra treatment. And with the current evidence suggesting yet another lineup of firefighting types, I can't help but feel there is a bit of favouritism going on here. Either that or just plain laziness, but still, they might yet surprise us with something new. Personally, I doubt it, but regardless, I'll be keeping my fingers crossed that they do. Anyway, back to similarities with other Pokemon, and again, I can't really see any. So far I've already explained how a similar smile or pose cannot count because they are simply just postures and expressions, and not actually part of the design. However, that being said, upon further inspection, there is one similarity which I feel I really should discuss, and that is Scorbunny's arms. As you see, they appear to have a near identical design to none other than Chespin. Okay, look, so the mouth can be forgiven, but now the arms too? From the same Pokemon? Coincidence? I think not. I mean, who the hell designed this? Did they just trace what they liked from Chespin and then just added in the rest? Because that's what it looks like. And you know, when you combine these seemingly copied features along with the copied posture, you know, the once original appearance of this Pokemonster certainly begins to take a massive nosedive into the uncanny valley. However, let's not whip out those air crash investigators just yet, because you see, despite the similarities, only the arm designs actually qualify as a true example of a copied design. Because you see, as I've already discussed, the mouth is just an expression, and the pose is just a posture. Both are subject to change based on conflicting emotions and given scenarios, so therefore they cannot be judged as its core design. So really, these arms are the only true resemblance to other Pokemon that Scorbunny actually seems to have. However, that being said, much like the mouth and the posture, these arms are not exclusive to any singular Pokemon. In fact, the Dex actually shows us a large list of Pokemon that share almost identical arm and paw designs, and yet overall look nothing alike. It's just the Pokemon animation style, if you will. Much like how many non-related Pokemon also share the same eye design, for example. So yes, on the surface it looks like another mixed bag of stolen goods, much like Grookey was. However, if you look at it from different postures or different expressions, you can see it actually looks nothing like the Pokemon that it's currently on trial for mimicking. And that is the most important thing. Overall, it looks different. I never once looked at this Pokemon and ever got reminded of any others. The truth be told, it was only after I compared the 3 new starters to all their previous counterparts that I actually made the comparison. And even now, after I know there is a comparison, does it ruin the design for me? No, not at all. I still think it looks great. And even with that one subtle detail, it still doesn't feel like a copy. Because it's not. Those arms just complement its design. And more importantly, it still looks and feels new and original. So yes, as I'm sure you can all tell by now, after that defence speech, I absolutely love the design of this new little pocket monster. I think Scorbunny looks adorable. It's cute, it's cool, and it's definitely a unique starter choice. Like I said, we have never had a rabbit starter of any kind before. So by default, it is definitely the most original option out of the 3 new starters. And it just looks awesome. What else can I say? I love it. Not as much as some, it would seem, but yes, anyway. I think one of the reasons why this little pocket monster feels so fresh to me is because until now there have only been 4 rabbit Pokemon. 2 evolutionary stage 1s and 2 stage 2s. And that's it. And yes, I know there is technically a 5th because Lopunny now has a Mega form, but as I stated before, Megas are only temporary forms, so they don't really count. And even if they did, it still only leaves 2 evolutionary lines. And when you compare that amount to, let's say, Monkey Pokemon for example, you can see why I would be quick to deem a new Rabbit Pokemon as fresh, and a new Monkey Pokemon as rotten. But regardless, either way, I think Scorbunny has a great design, and by my book, it is a welcome addition to the ever-expanding world of Pokemon, and I cannot wait to see what its evolutionary forms have in store. And speaking of what's in store, it's time to finally discuss the possible colour variants that we might see for this new Pokemon's shiny form. Now, unlike the grass starters, it would seem that the fire-type starters have been treated a lot better when it comes to their shiny variants. I mean, they still suffer from the same blandness for the most part, however the differences are at least a lot clearer here than that of their grass counterparts. Charmander and Tepig, for example, go from a common orange to a light gold colouring, which isn't bad, but it's still going from an orange to a bright gold, so it isn't much of a jump. So it doesn't stick out as much as it should. It's basically just a bronzed yellow. And speaking of yellow, Torchic's problem is that its shiny colours are just its old colours, but inverted. Seriously, I'm not joking. They have just taken the 2 colours and swapped them around. It's just laziness. However, things aren't all bad, as Chimchar's shiny, for example, replaces the dreaded orange with a unique wine colouring. And although more subtle, even Cyndaquil changes from that of a dark blue or turquoisey colour to that of a brown colouring. But that being said, I do think the original colouring was more unique. But anyway, the biggest colour difference actually comes in the form of the 2 most recent starters. Fennekin goes from a yellow to a cool silver design, and Litten goes from black to a ghostly white, both of which are pretty unique. So, as you can see, although not the best shiny forms in some cases anyway, there are still a couple of decent variants. And what changes can we expect to see for Scorbunny's shiny? Well, given their track record for cutting corners, it wouldn't actually surprise me if the only change they made is to that of the orange sections of this design. It could literally be any colour. But personally, I feel this yellowy gold colouring is a more likely option. considering that the same route was also taken for Charmander and Tepig. Still, that being said, looking at Litten's colour change from black to white, it wouldn't surprise me if Scorbunny did the reverse, going from white to black. And this could actually work really well. I mean, if they ditched the orange colouring and made the tips white, for example, it would almost take on a magician's hat or wand-like appearance. And seeming as a famous trick associated with a magician is pulling a rabbit out of a hat, this colour scheme would certainly be a very fitting and very thoughtful shiny variant for this new Pokemon. That being said, if they were to make this Pokemon black, then they would probably just cut corners and only do the tips black. But even then, that would still look pretty cool. And speaking of cool, if they really wanted to be creative, they could actually do something like this. Now, this colour palette I based off the beautiful Judy hops, and I feel this mixture of different colours adds a whole new characteristic to Scorbunny's design. And as far as shiny variants go, it would definitely be a unique choice, and certainly one that we have never seen before. And yes, I know the possibility of a Judy Hopps reference does seem a little far-fetched, but with the likes of Zootopia being a very successful film in Japan, and Japan being the place where Pokemon originates from, it's not that far of a stretch to believe that a reference such as this could fall our way. And what better reference than this? Judy herself has great fighting spirit and an undistinguishable fire that keeps her determined, battling hard to succeed. And does that sound like a familiar rumoured typing to you? And regardless, it wouldn't be the first time a film reference has affected a Pokemon's shiny palette, as Dragonite's shiny form, for example. That was based on none other than Pete's Dragon, another of Disney's characters. And yes, granted it is a pretty bad shiny, but the point still stands. It has been done before. Anyway, moving on now, and another possible variant could be this orange and green colouring, as I think it not only complements the design really well, but it almost looks like one of those bushy top carrots. And we all know who love carrots, don't we? But no, of course, I'm only joking around with this one. But in all seriousness, I am convinced that despite all the potential, they are still going to cut corners and just stick with the same old methods. However, that being said, with the two most recent examples having quite unique shiny palettes, I guess there is still at least a bit of hope for some unique colouring. So, in conclusion to this shiny discussion, and despite the other potential colours we also discussed, this right here is the design that I would personally choose for Scorbunny's shiny form. However, that being said, this one here is the one that I predict will be its official shiny form. So, just to confirm, this is the one I'm hoping for, and this is the one we are more than likely going to end up with. But still, never mind, eh? Well, hoppers, that just about does it for part 2 of this starter Pokemon discussion. Be sure to keep a lookout for the third and final part of this discussion trilogy, as I'll be concluding with the water-type Pokemon, Sobble. I will also give my overall thoughts on all 3 designs before finally revealing the Pokemon that I will be choosing when the games finally release. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have. Take care, hoppers, and I'll see you next time.